Good morning, everybody. My name is Darren St. George, and thank you for joining us for our Monday morning chit chat. As always, we have Sal St. George with us today, and he's going to be sharing about the life and comedic styles of Red Skelton. But we are taking a very special, our first, in fact, ever, virtual road trip to Red Skelton's hometown, and we're going to be visiting the Red Skelton Museum of American Comedy. So this is something it's unprecedented for us. We're giving it a shot, and we are really excited. Thanks to Ann Pratt and Mark Kratzner from the museum. Ann is the executive director and Mark is the curator. Both will be with us today. Ann is going to be handling the tour of the museum while Mark is her handy-dandy cameraman. So we're very excited for them. Thank you both for your time and talent today. We also, this isn't something we wanted to advertise because we couldn't guarantee 100% that the gentleman would be available this morning, but thankfully, he is with us. His name is Bryan Seastrom, and he is an actor-performer that's worked with St. George Productions for, I can't even count how many years, but I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with the man, and he is quite talented. Today, he's going to be joining us and doing a few excerpts from Red Skelton performances he's done in the past. So he's portrayed Red for years, and it's one of his favorite characters to portray. So he's going to be with us doing some of Red's comedy, and we have a fantastic show this morning. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and Ann from the museum, why don't you take it away and start the tour?
He was the youngest of 4 boys, and his father actually died before Red was even born. And the family was very, very poor, and so they all had to help out to get money for the family. And one story that Red likes to tell all the time, and I always couch this story with a little phrase that Red always says, if you want the truth, you better ask Edna. But if you want a good story, you can ask me. Edna was his first wife, and I think she worked pretty hard to keep him in line. But anyway,
excuse me, Ann, is it true that Red's father was a circus clown?
Well, not really. I think that legend has really grown, and Red's father, perhaps, Mark has done extensive research on this, when the circus that Red's father supposedly worked with was in Vincennes, and just trying to figure it all out. But what we think was that he was perhaps someone that when a circus came to town, he would help out. But we don't believe that he actually traveled with the circus much, perhaps. He ran a grocery store with his brother here in Vincennes, is what actually his job was.
Okay, so the story that the Freddie the Freeloader makeup was based on his father's makeup is not true?
Probably not. I mean, Red has just this love affair with clowns, and he has just his whole life loved clowns, loved the circus, really felt like clowns were the highest form of entertainment. And it's interesting, whenever he would be introduced, he never wanted to be introduced as Emmy winner or movie star, but always just as one of America's clowns, because he was so passionate about the fact that clowns really were the highest form of entertainment in his mind, and he really wanted to be considered a clown. But no, that particular makeup, I think, is something that Red created, or he perhaps saw during, as a young child, watching the circus, but we don't really know for sure.
Okay, can Mark get real close to those costumes that you have in the case, and can you describe what's in there?
Okay,
yeah, Mark,
so,
yeah, get real close, Mark. There we go.
So what you can see here at the top on the right, you see that plaid suit? That is the Clem Cadiddlehopper costume. And one of the reasons it's in this Vincennes case is that Red says that that particular character was based on a person that he knew growing up in Vincennes named Mr. Carl Hopper. So Clem Cadiddlehopper was loosely based on a man Red knew, kind of a country bumpkin type guy, Carl Hopper. But also in this case, we have a tuxedo that Red wore on stage, along with his cape that he got as an honorary doctorate at Vincennes University. We have just many things that people in Vincennes gave him. His Vincennes, Indiana fire helmet and medal. We have an I went to school with Red Skelton Club from the local high school. You'll see a photo at the bottom with a Welcome Home Red Skelton Parade from 1963, September 3rd. Funny personal story there that I like to tell. I was born September 10th, 1963. So 1 week after that parade, but my mom was a big Red Skelton fan, and she actually pushed up to the front of the line to get an autograph from Red when he was here. And so she says I actually got to meet Red before I was born. Anyway, this sign down here at the bottom is Bernard's, and that was a men's store here in town. And legend has it that when Red Skelton was in about the 4th grade, his teacher asked him what his middle name was, and he said, "Well, I don't have a middle name. You know, it's Red." And she said, "Well, everybody has a middle name." But so he said, "Well, it's Bernard." And later he said that he got that name from this store in town. So when the store closed, he got the sign. But we're not sure about the validity of that, since his birth certificate actually says Richard Bernard Skelton. Maybe he just liked the sign. Who knows? But that was the story Red told. Like I said, you gotta take everything story Red told, I think, with a little bit of humor and a little grain of salt, because he loved to tell a good story. Which brings me back to a story that I love to tell about when Red was a little boy here in Vincennes. When he was about 10 years old, he was selling newspapers outside the Pantheon Theater down on Main Street in Vincennes, Indiana. And it was a new theater at that time, hadn't been open very long, but he was there selling his papers. And he says a very fancy dressed man came up and asked if he was going to go to the show that night. And Red said no, he didn't think so. He didn't have enough money. And by the way, he had to sell all his papers. And the man gave him $1, which in those days bought all of Red's papers, and said if he came to the box office that night, there'd be a ticket waiting for him. Well, Red says he ran home as fast as he could to tell his mom, and he said she was so excited for him, she even gave him a nickel for popcorn. Well, Red goes back to the Pantheon Theater that evening, and sure enough, there was a ticket waiting for him, and he says he settled into his seat in the balcony there, and he had the curtains open. He started nudging the lady next to him. Hey, that's my friend, that's my friend. Well, the star of the show was the fancy man who had bought Red's papers, and it was Mr. Ed Wynn. Well, at intermission, Ed Wynn invited Red backstage, and Red said he held him up to those lead-weighted curtains, and he peeked out there at the audience, and Red said right then was when he knew what he wanted to do was to make people laugh. Well, that introduction, according to Red, led to a lifelong friendship with Ed Wynn. You can see a picture of them up here in the foyer of the Performing Arts Center, with Red and Ed together, Red and his Freddie makeup, and Ed there. That was a scene from a skit on the Red Skelton show that we have.
Mark, can you get in closer on that, Mark?
Story that we like to tell.
So he and Ed stayed lifelong friends.
They did. And actually, Red owned a theater in Hollywood that he bought from, help me, Mark. Where did he get the theater? Who owned the theater first that Red bought?
Oh, Charlie Chaplin.
Charlie Chaplin. The Charlie Chaplin Theater. Charlie Chaplin Studios, not a theater, my bad. Charlie Chaplin Studios in Hollywood, and they had Charlie Chaplin's footprints, with his out feet. Well, when Red bought it, he put his feet wearing the Red Skelton, or the Freddie the Freeloader shoes. You can see the hole in it. And he also had Ed Wynn's feet with his glasses also put in front of that studio out in Hollywood. And when Red ultimately sold the theater in the 1960s, he had all those footprints cut out. So we had these huge concrete blocks with Charlie Chaplin's footprints and signature, Red Skelton's footprints as Freddie, and also Ed Wynn's footprints. And that was the very first artifact that Mrs. Skelton donated to the Red Skelton Foundation, were those huge concrete blocks with the footprints in them.
And where are they now?
Well, they're down the hallway. If you want a little tour, we could go down the hallway and around the corner. Do you want to see them?
Sure. I have one question about Ed Wynn. Again, my research is not as good as yours. I remember reading that Red admonished Ed Wynn when he did Diary of Anne Frank, saying that you're a comedian, you should be doing comedy.
Now, I have heard that story as well. Mark, you want to chime in? Have you heard that as well?
Well, it didn't admonish, but Ed Wynn was always said, always do comedy. And then when after Ed Wynn did the Requiem, Red said, just remember, always do comedy, but because just the Requiem was just so hard work for Ed Wynn to do, but it was sort of like a jest, because Ed Wynn told Red to do comedy, and then Ed Wynn did a dramatic thing, and then so Ed Wynn sort of Red Skelton kind of teased Ed Wynn, saying, always do comedy, kind of thing.
All right, you can see
I
this
tend to
film.
think that Red could have been a great dramatic actor if he gave himself the opportunity.
Well, Ed Wynn has done, he did Anne Frank, and there's lots of other dramatic roles
Oh
before
no,
that.
yeah, I know Ed Wynn. He was on Twilight Zone and quite a few other shows. What I was getting at is Red Skelton could have been a great dramatic actor if he gave himself that opportunity.
A lot of comedians do you know, dramatic roles, but it's sort of personal. You know, they do comedy to not do dramatic. Not to, you know,
And you can see we're down here at the footprints now. Here's Charlie Chaplin's footprint, or his signature. And then, I don't know, can you see those? It might be a little bit of a glare. And then here are Charlie Chaplin's footprints. And then we have Ed Wynn's footprints and his autograph and his little glasses here that you can see. And then the last block that we have is Red Skelton's footprints. You see the little hole there from the Freddie the Freeloader shoes for the hole in the bottom. And these were autographed in March of 1961. He and Ed Wynn got together and autographed them. And you can see over here on the signage that we had made, this is, the theater is now actually the studio. I keep calling it the theater. The studio is now owned by the Muppet Company, Jim Henson's company, and it's here. But this is how it would have looked in the early days of Hollywood and when Red Skelton bought it. So anyway, so we'll make a quick trip back. Like I said, we were walking down the lobby of the Floating Arts Center. You can see it's a beautiful space. One little story I'm going to tell. As we come through, Mark, could you kind of zoom up on the ceiling tiles here? And then these columns that go around it. When they built the theater, and it kind of is echoed within the theater itself, they did a little nod to Red's love of the circus. So you can see those ceiling tiles and the poles make it a little bit reminiscent of the sweep of a circus tent when you're inside. And that was intentional to make this have a feel of a circus tent a little bit within this beautiful building.
I know this is like a performing arts center.
Yes, yes.
And what kind of
theater
programs?
inside-
What kind of programs do you produce?
Well, it's because we're on a university campus, it's a fully functioning theater department here at the university. So there are student performances, shows, there are musical performances by students and staff, as well as a community series that's run by the University Foundation that brings in 7 shows a year with bigger stars. It's not a huge theater, it's 850 seats. But they've had a lot of great people come through here doing shows, and then also people within the community rent out the theater to do shows. We bring in Red Skelton impersonator Brian Hoffman, comes in once a year at our festival and does shows. And it's really, really well used, actually. It's a great, beautiful, beautiful theater, performing arts.
I want to introduce you, Ann and Mark. I want to introduce you. Are you there, Brian? Did we lose Brian? There he is. This is Bryan Seastrom. When we did our story about Red Skelton, he portrayed Red, and that was about 5 years ago, maybe more at this point. And we had a wonderful turnout. People still love Red Skelton. Brian, you on?
Yeah, sorry, I had to put my earphones in because I'm by the window and there's kids out playing. It was a wonderful time. We had such a great time. I had a wonderful time learning about Red and learning about his life and who he was. And I knew of Red, but it wasn't until working with Sal that I really knew who Red was and the kind of work that he did. And I just loved it so much. And I really found quite a connection to him.
That's great.
Terrific.
Yeah, I love his comedy.
We'll come back to Brian in a few minutes, and he's going to do a little bit of his Red Skelton for us. And let's take it back to Ann right now.
All right, well, thank you. I don't know if you saw earlier, but we didn't go in the theater, but we have like a little picture in the museum because we have a lot of guests that ask about the theater. We can't always take them in there, but you can see It's a European style theater. It has 2 balconies as well as a large down area. So it's really, really beautiful in there and very comfortable. Anyway, back to the museum. So here we are in the museum store. We have lots of great merchandise that we sell, very fun, very unique. If anyone's interested, they can also see it on our website, redskeltonmuseum.org, if you're interested in any Red Skelton Museum merchandise that we may have. The theme of the museum is Red Skelton, a legacy of laughter. So that's kind of our key right up here at the top. And we'll just kind of head through the museum here, and I'll talk a little bit more about Red as we go through the museum and about what you're going to see within our walls. We start here in this foyer area that tells about Red's childhood here in Vincennes and his time here with this is Red and his mom and his brothers. So you can see Red here when he's just about 6 years old. But what's neat about the museum, many of these are motion activated, many of our exhibits. So as you step forward, the audio will start on these. We haven't muted today, but this is just some funny clips from his TV shows and movies. One of the highlights is our timeline here in the museum. And it shows everything from highlights from when Red was born in 1913, like I said, just across the street from the museum, up through his death in 1997 at the age of 84. The red lines on the timeline are events specific to Red's life. Yellow are events specific to the media world. And then the blue at the bottom are world events. One thing I think is so interesting, Red Skelton Show went on the air in 1951. In 1954, only 55% of households had a TV. Only 6 years later, in 1960, 90% of the households had a TV in their home. So Red, I think, was really right there ahead of the curve, and he knew that TV was going to be the medium of the future. I think Red, if he was alive today, he would be buying the newest Apple Watch and Apple phone every time it came out. He was really a techie for his day. His collection of audio equipment and cameras and all sorts of things just show how interested he was in technology.
And
So
we had a question, and one of our guests wants to know, did Red know that this museum was being planned for him prior to his passing?
He did not know, because he died in 97 and the museum didn't actually open until 2013, so 16 years later. But right after he passed, the one of the people in town that knew him, or Dr. Summers, actually, the president of the university, went and proposed to the board of directors that they begin plans for a museum and a performing arts center in his honor. And actually, in some of the historical files, when I first started working for the museum, I worked in the foundation office because we didn't have a museum building yet. And we found letters to Dr. Beckus, who was a previous president of the university, who was the president when Red was still alive. And there was correspondence where Red said it was always his wish to have a theater here in his honor. So he really wished for that, and Mrs. Skelton has confirmed that of all the places, he did not want his legacy remembered in California or Hollywood, even though he lived there. He really wanted it here in his hometown, and he really felt very connected to Vincennes and connected here to his roots in southern Indiana. And when you would go to any of his shows, he would often ask, is there anybody here from Vincennes? And if there were, he would bring him back to his dressing room, and just really loved being from the small town boy and being from Vincennes, Indiana. Well, we're going to step now into our little theater in the museum. You can see, I don't know if it's pretty dark, but we have an intro film that we show when people come in here. It's a tiny theater in here, seats about 32 people, and all of our guests start here and see this little intro show before they go back out and enjoy the rest of the museum. So it's just kind of a nice little way to kick off your tour of the museum. And then the museum kind of goes chronologically through Red's career. We're starting here with his time in vaudeville and all of his silly physical comedy that he did. Our exhibits are very interactive, which is great because, as you probably know, the younger generation isn't always as familiar with Red Skelton as those of us 50 plus. And so we wanted to make it very interactive, so when grandparents brought their grandchildren or parents brought their children, the children also, as well as the adults, would be intrigued by the silliness of Red and the interactivity of the museum. So one of our first ones here is Red's Silly Footsteps, and I'm going to give it a go here. Usually I'm pretty good at it, but I didn't realize today I kind of have my high heels on. But if you kind of step on all these numbered steps in order, you end up doing kind of a little stagger walk across the floor. But this shows some of the props that Red used in his vaudeville stage shows here with the baby in the bathwater and the Guzzler's gin and some of the things that Red used here.
Ann, could
Yes.
you give us a little timeline regarding his marriages? We have a large group of guests who like to know the personal life of of Red
so
Skelton.
Red married his first wife Edna, whom he met when he was working in a movie theater, and Edna was there as well. And he married her in 1931. And she, I believe, Red was about 17 and she was 16 or 17 and 18. They were pretty young when they first married. And she became his business manager and a co-writer for many of his skits, and they worked together, kind of like George and Gracie. They were a team together for a while. And then ultimately, according to Red, he comes home and there's a note that says, I'm leaving you, but I'll still be your business manager, which she continued to do for many, many years. And then he, in 1945, he married Georgia Davis, who was a Hollywood starlet, and he married her, and that's the wife with whom he had both of his children. He had Valentina in 1947 and Richard in 1948. And he and Edna were married through 1971 when they divorced. And then he married his third wife, Lothian, in 1973. And she remains living to this day. And she's been our benefactor with all the artifacts, or many of the artifacts here in the museum. And Valentina, his daughter, is still living. She's very reclusive, I guess would be a good word. She doesn't really want to be part of the spotlight. She did come for the grand opening in 2013, but I've encouraged her to come again, and she really doesn't like to fly. And so she lives out there, very friendly, very sweet to talk to, but just doesn't really want to be part of a limelight situation. And his son Richard, unfortunately, which we'll see a little bit later in the museum, there's an exhibit about persevering through the sadness. Richard contracted leukemia just before he turned 10 years old, and Red took the family on kind of a whirlwind European tour, just to make Richard be able to see as much as he could in his short life. And Richard ultimately died in 1958 at the age of 10 years old. So Red was kind of in the height of his television career at that point, and I'm sure it was very, very difficult, but he did persevere and continued on. And I know that was probably a contributing factor to the demise of his marriage with Georgia. I'm sure it's very, very hard to lose a child, but they ultimately did divorce, about 10 years plus later. You ready to continue on?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here we go. We're now moving out of vaudeville into radio, which Red started on the radio in the late 1930s, and he got his own radio show in 1942. I'm going to say that. Mark is going to jump in if I'm wrong on dates. Sometimes I'm not quite right on dates exactly, but he was on the radio up to then, and then he continued after radio. That's when really many of his characters were created, like Freddy the Freeloader, San Fernando Red, Little Hopper. He brought those characters to life initially on the radio, and then when he started his television show, he brought them to life with costumes and the whole bit. The only character who didn't make the transition as well, I should say, from radio to television was Junior, the mean little kid. And there are pictures of costumes, but mainly they were publicity shots, but Junior did not make many appearances on the Red Skelton show. He was mainly a radio character. And he is the character who coined the popular phrase, which you can see up here in the museum, I doed it. Yeah. Because Junior was a naughty little kid, and he would say, if I do it, I get a whipping. And then he says, I doed it, and then he would get his whipping. And so you can see the two costumes here that he had. Go ahead.
That makes sense, Ann, that he didn't want to make the transfer. Fanny Bryce continued doing Baby Snooks, and she only did it once on TV, and she realized it didn't make the transition. It wasn't worth it. Yeah,
to see an adult in a little kid costume just seems a little odd, I think. think Red realized that. But you'll see here the pretty costume and then the blown up costume after he did it. So you can see those costumes here that we do have, probably from the once or twice he actually did that on the show. We have
And we have a question from
here.
one of our guests, and she wants to know, did Red have a nervous breakdown?
Yeah.
Yes, he did, in the Army. And I think it was, I don't know if you would call it a nervous breakdown or more of a too much to do, just exhaustion type of breakdown. He was a soldier, but they were also having him entertain troops all the time. And I think ultimately just the stress of having to do both roles kind of became too much for him. And he had a medical release from the Army, but he did continue to entertain then as an entertainer once he was no longer a soldier. But this is our sound booth where we have our, you can go in and play some of Red's radio shows and enter your own sound effects as the lights will light up in here. And it's kind of fun for visitors. And we have some of the original sound effects here on the left that people would use to make sounds, like the bottom blue box is a squeak box. When you turn it, it sounds like a door creaking open. Of course, the bells. And then over here is, I think it's called a Foley machine, right? With those tapes, and all those tapes have sounds on them that would make different sound effects during the radio shows. Just a little bit about the radio as we go through here. This one. Okay, a little bit more about radio here. You can just see some of our panels that we have here in the museum that show. Here's Red and Edna here doing some radio. It's first fly. Any questions about radio? A lot of people don't know that Red did so many feature films. Mark and I were talking about this, but over 40 feature films throughout his career. Oh, and I'm going to get a little background noise here. I got a little bit too close to one of our things. But yeah, he started with probably some of the most famous people he worked with were Lucille Ball. He did in DuBarry Was the Lady. He was with Esther Williams in Texas Cardinal, and he was with Esther Williams in another one as well, I believe. He was in a couple with Esther Williams.
Yeah, I think he did 3 movies with Esther Williams.
Right. So great film star. And he was smart enough that when because back in the day, you had to sign a pretty ironclad contract with the movie companies. And Red was smart enough to get himself a little out if he said he decided to do television. So he was one of the only stars who was able to do television and be under a movie contract with MGM at the same time. So he started his television career and continued to do films with them as well. And he was smart enough to know that was a great idea to have that written into his contract.
Ann, I have a question for you, Ann. I see in the marquee behind you, you've got The Fuller Brushman, which was one of his most popular movies.
Yes, absolutely. And they chose that to put up here, the Avalon Theater, Indianapolis, I believe, where they did the premiere.
From what I've read, again, they wanted him to do a sequel and he wasn't available, and they turned it to The Fuller Brush Girl and they gave it to Lucille Ball to portray.
I am not sure about that, but you probably know.
And the reason I bring it up is because both Red and Lucy were taken, Buster Keaton took both of them under his wing to give them comedy lessons. Do you know anything about Buster and Red?
Yes, Buster, he was under contract to MGM. He got a very small pay. This was during Buster's hard times, and he was just going to do anything for money. But MGM's mostly known for musicals and very weak on comedy, and so it was hard to find a vehicle for Red Skelton. But so they took plot lines from Buster Keaton's old films, Cameraman, Spike Marriage, and others, and tried to and made them for Red Skelton to do. And so Red Skelton did many skits that Buster Keaton did in the past. And Buster Keaton was on set at the time and advising Red on how to do things, how funny he was. Red Skelton appeared on This Is Your Life for Buster Keaton and talked about how Buster Keaton helped him during his programs.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, we're going to scooch out of our movie area here. Try to Mark will keep it going. As you can see, Red's director chair with his name on it and some other parts. Now we're moving into more the television area. And a little bit about Red as a pantomime artist. This is our green screen, and this exhibit, you can step up and do a pantomime alongside Red on the video, and then at the end it'll show you and Red side by side doing your pantomime together. You can see how you match up. As I mentioned earlier about little Richard passing away at the age of 10, this talks about joy and sadness, and these are some pictures of their tour in Europe when, shortly before he passed, and there he is meeting the Pope, and that's Red in Georgia and Red playing with the kids here at home. I'm sure they had a lot of fun. And we have these throughout the museum. These are called scrapbook stations, and it's just got a little bit more in-depth information about whatever exhibit we're visiting, whether it's the vaudeville or the radio, or now this one's about his time at home. So those little scrapbook stations are throughout the museum and reproductions of family pictures or studio shots that Red has.
And I have another question for you.
Go ahead.
I have another question for you.
Yes.
Well, first of all, the further you go into the museum, your bandwidth is getting lower and lower. So you're coming in and out on us, just so you know. But more importantly, I did not realize how large this museum is.
We're right here, and then we'll jump back into the book part. But these are awards that, these are three Red Jimmies, and these awards just...
I think we lost her. Okay, while we're waiting for her to come back, Bryan, are you there? Oh, Bryan.
I'm here.
Okay, let's do a little piece for them while we're waiting for Ann to come back.
All right, okay.
You're going to pick out one. By the way, ladies, gentlemen, Bryan worked with us for many years, and then he got picked up by this little organization called Walt Disney. And for the last number of years, he has been touring around the world, literally, as a performer on the Disney cruise lines. He just recently got off the ship, came home when all of this happened, and now, fortunately, I guess his parents are happy that he's back home. But up to this point, for the last 3 or 4 years, he's been around the world several times.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I'm lucky to be home.
Okay, so what bit are you going to just do, Red?
Yeah, I'll do a little of our opening one.
Okay.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so pleased to be here. Everyone treats me so nice. For example, when I arrived, someone yelled out, "Red Skelton is here! Red Skelton is here!" I was so embarrassed. I was sorry I yelled. I'm happy to be here. I like New York. But you got to be careful. Just the other day, we were walking through Times Square, and I felt a pickpocket reaching into my pocket for my wallet. I reached in from the other side. I shook hands with him. But it's so nice. It's so nice to be here. I got a joke for you. Two goofy guys planning a prison break. One says, "I know how we can get out of here." The other guy says, "We can?" He says, "Yes." He says, "How?" He says, "I got this big flashlight. Later on tonight, we'll come out to the wall. I'll shine the light up the wall. You climb up the beam." He says, "You really think I'm nuts, don't you? I know what you do. I climb halfway up. You shut it off."
Very good. You know what? We'll come back to you in a few minutes with some Gertrude and Heathcliff, okay?
All right.
All right. Let's go back to Ann, please.
All right, do we have our video and audio back in track here?
Yep.
Okay, well, we kind of moved back to the front edge of the museum, but we're going to be shooting back here a little bit. This is called our character gallery, and I don't want to go too far back in there because I'm afraid we'll lose our Wi-Fi again. This building is all concrete block on the outside, and and the walls are very thick, so sometimes we'll lose our Wi-Fi service back in the back of the museum. But anyway, in the character gallery, each character, we'll see if we can get back here to see one of them, please. But each character has its own station. When I say each character, it's 6 of Red's most beloved characters. Freddy the Freeloader, George Appleby, Clem Cadiddlehopper, San Fernando Red, Sheriff Deadeye, and Cauliflower McCall. You can see Cauliflower Station right here. And it has the original costume that he wore on the Red Skelton show as Cauliflower, some fun facts about Cauliflower. And then next to each station, there's a television set. And if you push the button on the television set, it will play skits from the Red Skelton show with Red as that character. So people can go around and spend a lot of time in the character gallery, just really laughing and enjoying. This is where we hear most of the laughter in the museum, I would say, is when people are back here watching the skits from the TV show with Red as these various characters.
And can I ask you, who is your clientele?
They are mostly, I would say, over the age of 55, and mostly from out of the county. I would say that probably 85% of our visitors come from outside of Knox County, and we get them from all over the country. We keep a track in our visitors guide, and we've had guests from every state in the union, and many, many countries have been here. I would say our visitors are concentrated in the Midwest, the Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri. You know, we get a lot of visitors, but really they've come from everywhere. And some people make a special trip to the Midwest just to come see the museum. And so that's always exciting for us to hear.
I can see why. I had no idea how large this museum was. It's a wonderful
and
tribute.
so interactive is what makes it so fun. So many things to do in here besides just kind of look at old pictures. You can really sort of immerse yourself in Red's life here in the museum, which is really great. But you'll see the Freddy the Freeloader over there. It's kind of at a distance, but there's a blue Samsonite suitcase in there that Red kept all of his Freddy costume pieces and parts and makeup and everything in. And Mrs. Skelton told us that Red told her if the house ever caught on fire, make sure she grabbed that blue suitcase and got it out, because that was very, very important to him, because Freddy is Red's favorite character. Always, always his favorite character was Freddy. I think he's somehow related to him.
Mark, can we get closer to that and see that suitcase? Wow. So that's his costume.
Sure is. That's a costume, and that scarf that he was always whipping around his neck as Freddy, there's little weights at the bottom of each end of that costume. So when he gave it a good fling, it made it all the way around his neck.
Now, where
and there's
exactly?
Those little funny things still. Yes.
Where exactly is the museum? It's in Vincennes?
It's in Vincennes, Indiana, and it's on the campus of Vincennes University, which is a 2-year college in Vincennes. It has some 4-year degrees, but it's mainly a 2-year college. But it's a big campus. Like, it has a lot of students. We have 7 dormitories, and it's a beautiful, beautiful campus. And what's great about Vincennes is we're not just kind of a one-stop shop. We've got an incredible Indiana Military Museum. We have Grassland, the home of our 9th president, William Henry Harrison. We have the largest monuments outside of Washington, D.C. here, called the George Rogers Clark National Historical Park. Kind of looks like the Lincoln Memorial. So we are starting to really get busloads of tours in here visiting Vincennes to see not just the Red Skelton Museum, but all that our historic town has to offer, because Vincennes is the oldest city in Indiana. We were founded in 1732. So we're actually coming up on our tricentennial here in Vincennes.
Mark, would you tell our guests other celebrities that came from Indiana?
Well, here in Vincennes, we're kind of unique. We got about four to speak of course, Red Skelton, but we got Buck Jones, who was a major Western star during this time, and he died at the Coconut Grove fire as a hero. He was saving people from the fire. It was a silent star, but he was just getting into sound films at the time. Speaking of silent films, we had Alice Terry. Alice Terry was a major silent star. She appeared with Rudy Valentino films, so mostly she appeared in lots of period pieces. And then we get into a little bit of modern times. We got Albie Moore. Albie Moore was Hank Kimball and Green Acres. So we got four people. We even have a little bit of a connection to the Lone Ranger. Brace Beamer was the voice of the Lone Ranger on radio, and he lived here in Vincennes for a brief period of time. But we got our major star, so it would be Carol Lombard. She's from Fort Wayne, and she was a major star in the films. She came here for a war bond tour in 42, just right after the war, and so she died in a plane crash going home. And she was she's probably the only woman who could tame Clark Gable. They were married together, and comes to mind as Forrest Tucker from F Troop. Some major Sir James Dean. There's a small museum in James Dean's hometown in Fairmount, Indiana, that a private collector has collected many items, including items from a giant. So his motorcycle is there. So we got Sir Dick Yark from Bewitch. He was born here in Fort Wayne, and so we got Western stars, Western stars, Ken Maynard, the current Maynard, the Maynard brothers were here. We have four Tarzans from Indiana. The first Tarzan, Elmo Lincoln, was a silent star. He was born here. And then we got James Pierce, who was the last silent star, last person to play Tarzan in the silent films, but he did Tarzan on the radio program. We got Denny Miller, who appeared Tarzan only once, and sort of kind of go blank on. I thought we had a fourth one, but the fourth one, in a way, we had the person the young child who played young Tarzan in the silent film was also from Indiana.
Wow.
So we have
a very struck state.
Oh yeah, and people behind the scenes, Robert Wise, who directed the West Side Story, was from here. Yeah. Many writers who were here from here. Allison Jones from Family Affair was born here. So we just a lot of people. I'm going to be working on a exhibit on the comedians that were just from here in the future, sometime in 2022, I think is I'm kind of working on an exhibit here, because part of the museum's mission is to not just do Red Skelton, but also the legacy of comedy. We're the Red Skelton Museum of American Comedy, so I'm just trying to think of ways how we can show how American comedy was is represented. There's a nice museum in Jamestown that has just is big on comedy, but so it looks like they focus on stand-up, and they also blend some other comedy. But there's a lot more to comedy than just stand-up. There's motion pictures, television, and radio. And I hope we and lots of contemporaries from Red Skelton's life. We hope to represent that type of comedy that he had.
Ann, I have a question. Mark, I just want to ask Ann a question. Did you want to show us that new exhibit that you're about to debut?
Yes, we are heading that way right now. And the name of this exhibit is We Doed It. And I talked briefly about Junior and his phrase of I do it. I doed it, that kind of debuted in 1942, I believe, when Junior first said that. But then when World War II started, this phrase really caught on, and with the war effort. And people were saying, I doed it, to show that they helped volunteer in the war. And also on the jet planes, they would put We Doed It, you know, on their bombers to show that they were going to bomb the other planes and take care of business, you know, in the war. And it's just so interesting how many things sort of rose out of that phrase. And you'll see a little more as we get around to the artifact case, but that's kind of the name of it. It's sort of twofold for us. You know, this is the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. So we're celebrating that and Red's time in the war, both as a soldier and as a comedian. And then also We Doed It. We've got the museum open. We've been open 7 years. And so it just has a lot of meaning for us.
Mark, can you move in a little closer to some of those artifacts so we can see them?
Yep, we're going that way. I'm just going to kind of get that way. This is briefly Red's Wartime Films, a few of those, and then some of the places he went and performed prior to joining the Army himself. He's such a patriotic person, and he went on working with the war effort even before he joined as a soldier. And we'll get to the exhibits, and then we're going to jump back to our Pledge of Allegiance exhibit. But the artifacts are here in suitcases. And you can see a game in here, I Doed It, that was created. We have a button that says We Doed It from the Brooklyn Dodgers when they won the World Series in 1947. Many cartoons feature the phrase I Doed It, including Bugs Bunny, Woody Woodpecker, and some other cartoons. And there's lots of clips. Yep.
Could we back up a little bit and get to the Pledge of Allegiance? Because that was a landmark moment for him when he recorded that, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And he recorded that on January 14th, 1969. And it's interesting. We did last year was the 50th anniversary of the recitation of Red's recitation of the pledge. And so we did a big exhibit on that last year. And it's interesting, in the video, Red credits his teacher, Mr. Lasswell, for, you know, the words to the pledge. But there was a letter that we found Mark found in the archives, where Red had written a letter to his wife, Georgia. Red famously wrote letters to his wives every single day. It might be a love letter, might be musings about what he's doing, whatever. He just always wrote a letter. And in this particular letter that he wrote in the fall of 1968, was about, it was during the I guess the unrest during the Vietnam War, and he saw someone burning a flag in the streets, and he told Georgia, he said, I'm just so saddened by what I see. I don't think people understand what they're hearing when they say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think I need to help explain it to them. He says, I'm thinking about something like this. And he basically wrote down in the letter to Georgia all the words he would ultimately say on his show: the I, me, an individual, a committee of one, pledge, dedicate all my worldly goods to give without self-pity. And it goes on throughout each word in the pledge, and he explains that word. And it's just so touching, and it became a giant hit. It reached the top 100 list. Columbia made a record of it, which just sold hundreds of thousands of copies of this record, and it was just really a big moment in Red's life, and it was in the country. It was read into the congressional record 7 times. I just wish we could get it out there now more. It's really an amazing thing.
You're absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, if our guests want to watch Red doing the recitation, we do have it with our clips of Red. So just go to our site and check it out on YouTube. You'll get to see this, and it is, as you said, a very stirring and emotional recitation.
So just continuing on through the artifacts from our new exhibit, we have some scrapbooks of Red's time in the war that he took photographs. He took of places he saw and people he saw throughout the war, so you can see a little bit of those photographs. We have the Army uniform that he wore in the Army as a soldier. It's on loan from the Indiana Military Museum. And so that we're very grateful to them to let us use it for our exhibit. And some information about his time at Camp Robert. And then you'll notice along this wall, it's kind of been behind Mark, but we have all of his, or not all of them, but a few of his original works of art. Mark changes these out about quarterly in the museum. We probably have, gosh, well over 100 original works of art from Red Skelton. Some are oil paintings, some are colored pencil. He famously would keep the napkins from his first class airline travel and draw pictures on the airline napkins. And you can still see the airline logo on the bottom of some of his pictures that he did on the napkins. But he started painting as a very young man, and he said it relaxed him. I know when I've talked to Mrs. Skelton, she said that he was one of those people that would just sleep in little 20, 30-minute increments and would just be up all night, whether it was painting or he would write poetry and write stories and create music. He wrote marches, and he was just a very creative person, and he had to be busy all the time. And he just, all night long, he would just get up and work on his various interests. He listened to tapes of his shows, to listen to where the laughter came and you know, what bits got the most laughter or what bits he might need to tweak. And he just was so, I don't even know, so energetic and so full of life and just had so many passions. And just like he loved the Japanese culture, and he went through a phase in his painting where he did many, many paintings. So it makes it interesting for us, for Mark, I should say, to create new exhibits, because Red had so many interests that we can, there's not space in the museum to showcase all of those things, but with our temporary exhibits, we can showcase pieces of Red's life that maybe people didn't know about him. Like last fall, we showcased his giant camera collection. He was a very passionate photographer and always had a camera or a video camera with him. And so we showcased some of his camera collection and some of the pictures that he had taken as a photographer.
Excellent. And as you're heading towards the front of the theater, the museum, I'm going to bring Bryan back one more time to do his Gertrude and Heathcliff for us, and then we can close it out with you at the front, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, Bryan, let's take it away.
Okay, I got another joke for you. I got a joke for you. We got Gertrude and Heathcliff, the two seagulls. Gertrude and Heathcliff. Gertrude and Heathcliff are flying along when all of a sudden the jet plane goes whizzing by them. And Gertrude says, "Good heavens, did you see how fast that bird was going?" And Heathcliff says, "So what? If your tail was on fire, you'd be going fast too." I got another one for you. Gertrude and Heathcliff are talking. Gertrude says, "Hey Heathcliff, you remember my nearsighted cousin? Oh, he just eloped with a feather duster." "A feather duster? Is he happy? He said he's never been so tickled in his life." I got one more for you. My favorite one. Heathcliff, you're always worrying about things. And he says, I know. It's right now I'm worried about Willie the whale. And he says, why? That's the way they talk. Why? Willie the whale just fell in love with a submarine. Every time the submarine shoots off a torpedo, Willie hands him stars.
Nice job, Bryan. Thank you so much. Let's get back to Annie now.
All right, so I'm here at the front of the museum in the museum store. This is the view most guests get when they first walk in and visit us here at the museum. Welcome to the Red Skelton Museum, and this is one of our 14 giant Red Skelton statues that are scattered around town, and we always bring them back home at our festival and put them outside around the circle in front of the museum. But different businesses adopted a Red Skelton statue and had artists paint them or decorate them in different ways. And so it's kind of fun to have our Red Skeltons back here. We have a couple here at the museum, but many of them are scattered around Vincennes at different businesses.
And as we close this out, how do you think Red would have reacted to seeing all of this?
Oh my goodness, I think he would have been so pleased, so pleased, and so flattered, and probably so humbled. He was such a humble man, just an everyman. And that's what's so rewarding about this job is we've never had a guest come in and say, you know, Red was a jerk when I met him or anything like that. It's always just praise, praise, praise for what a wonderful person he was and how kind he was to everyone he met. And that's just very rewarding to hear. And it makes me think that he would really, really have been pleased to see how he was honored here in his hometown.
Well, Ann, I can't thank you enough. I know our guests are probably thrilled with what you've showed us. Nobody anticipated that this museum was as large, as in-depth, as all-inclusive as it is. It's really a remarkable achievement. And congratulations to you and to Mark for keeping this thing alive and keeping the memory of Red Skelton alive.
Well, we appreciate you letting us showcase the museum. And if anybody wants to learn more about upcoming events or decides to make a trip here to see us, our website, redskeltonmuseum.org, has tons of information, and we'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody wants to reach out to us specifically.
And you're reopening this week, aren't you?
Yes, we're opening, well, June 14th, next Sunday, we're opening. And we have a big following on Facebook. I think we've reached over 3,000 followers now on Facebook. And so if anybody looks us up, Red Skelton Museum of American Comedy on Facebook is another way to follow along and see what's what.
Terrific. And thank you so much. Mark, thank you as well. The man behind the camera.
Yes, thank you so much.
Have a great day. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and watch for new information that we'll be sending out soon. And sorry for the technical difficulties today, but I think Ann carried it off beautifully. Have a great day and a great week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.